vertical figure eight of the hip. And this goes right into the 30-day challenge that's happening right now in my Facebook group. But if you're just doing this outside of the challenge, it's still going to be helpful and useful for you. So what we have are vertical figure eights. We can do them in 2 directions. And there are 2 techniques that are the most popular for doing them. And I'm going to go over both of those today, along with kind of what makes them different from each other. The biggest difference on the onset when we're watching people learn one or the other, or try to learn one when they know the other better, is whether or not that heel comes off the floor. And that is a big driver for stylistic differences in these figure eights of the hip. So what I want to first talk about is that in both cases, we're still using a lot of abdominal and oblique muscles to pull the hips up. So even in the ones that are more leg-driven, they're not completely leg-driven. We're still using the core. So I'm going to start with the one that we use the most in fusion belly dance, and that is keeping the heels on the floor. So my feet are completely flat, my weight is even, and I'm going to bend the knees. Low belly draws in, ribs lift up. And so what I'm going to do first is empty the leg, drop a hip down. There's another Technique Tuesday about that concept, so I'm going to kind of blow past it for today. We're going to drop that hip down, send it out, slight weight shift, but not a complete one, and then pulling from the obliques. We're going to pull that hip up, which of course sends the opposite hip down. Now my heels have stayed on the floor this whole time. I'm using that knee bend and the adjustment of the knee to help with this up and down motion. So now that the other side is down, I can slide it out, pull it up from the oblique, shift down, slide out, up, down, out, up, down, out, up. And all the while keeping the upper body still, the head level, and the heels on the floor. Very much core driven, but the knees are adjusting. So don't make the mistake of thinking that heels on the floor means your legs don't move. They absolutely move through the knees. I'm going to change my direction. We're going to go up, out, down, up, out, down, up, out, down, and so on. The heels are still down. Same shape. We can draw this in 2 different directions. So in most of the fusion world, we refer to this direction as a Maya, and the opposite, the first direction I did, as a Taksim. Or you can just call them vertical figure eights, up to down or down to up, however you like. Now, we're going to talk about the other one that I don't teach as much in my classes, but that is absolutely valid. And for a lot of people feels more natural because your legs get to help out a lot more, and your legs are used to helping out a lot in our day-to-day movement. So for this one, I'm going to take my body on a little angle so you can see my feet better, hopefully. I think I'm completely on frame. All right, we're going to bend those knees. And then, instead of just pulling up from the oblique when I lift, I'm going to allow my heel to come up as well. And I'm thinking about pushing the floor away. It's kind of the phrase that I think of when I think of this. I'm going to push the floor away, but I'm still controlling the up through that oblique. And then I'm going to change it to the other side. So facing forward now, I'm going to bend the other knee, set it down, and as you can see, my heels are switching, and now I'm pushing the floor away on the other side. So I've got that heel up and that hip up, and I'm just going to keep going back and forth. I'm going to send it through, bend the knees, switch which heel is up and down, send it through, bend the knees, switch, switch, and switch. Now I like to keep these still as level as possible, so with that heel coming off the floor, it's not necessarily to create a level change. Although for, in whatever context you're dancing in, you might want to do that for a little extra drama, a little dive into something. But for me, I like to keep these still completely level, and as though I could balance something on my head. But now I'm letting the legs do a little bit more of the driving, and you get a juicier, bigger movement out of that. So let's take it in the other direction. and I bend those knees again. As I come up the center, the heel comes up. I'm going to send it out and down, and then as I place that heel down, the other heel comes up. I think of these as you're allowed to have one heel on the floor at a time when you are doing these figure eights with the help from the legs, with the heels coming up, right? And it almost feels a little bit strange to me now because I usually do them with my heels down. But I first started dancing in another style where the heels came up, and that idea of pushing the floor away was actually what we did. And it was hard for me to learn how to do it with my heels on the floor. And I know that it's more core work. So for beginners, sometimes starting with the heel up is a little more accessible. However, in fusion, we tend to keep those down. So just for a little moment of contrast, this is heels down to up figure eight or tuck-seam. And now I'm going to bring that little heel up into it. You can see how much bigger and juicier it gets. I'm going to change my direction. I'm going to keep working the heels up version. Everything else on top is nice and still. And now I'm going to set those heels down and keep that shape going, the up to down figure eight or the Maya. So, there you have it. You now have 4 variations on a vertical figure eight in the hips to play with. Both directions, with or without that heel lift and that help with the leg. So go forth and play with those a little bit more.